Hello everyone and Namaskar. Welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today is 6th August 2025 and today we have some very important topics for the discussion from the Hindu newspaper. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion and let's understand all these important topics in a detailed and in-depth manner. And the first topic that we are going to discuss is about recent flash floods in Uttarakhand. We all knew that Uttarakhand is vulnerable to cloudburst and flash floods, and in fact flash floods in Uttarakhand have left a disastrous impact on the state of Uttarakhand. So let's understand what exactly is a cloudburst and how it could trigger flash floods, and that would result in a major disaster like a state in Uttarakhand. Now what is the context? The context is that on August 5th this month, so flash floods and mudslides, they have ravaged a Darali village in Uttarkashi, and these flash floods have killed at least 4 people and 60 people feared trapped as well. And in fact this is very important from the disaster management perspective in General Studies paper 3 and General Studies paper 1 also. In geography this could be very important. So you might be asked, what are the factors that could trigger cloudburst or flash floods? So in fact a flash floods or the cloudburst, because cloudburst trigger the flash floods, right? So in case of extreme or torrential rainfall over a very small area for a 1 or 2 hours, so that could easily trigger the flash floods in a state like Uttarakhand. So therefore these flash floods have highlighted the vulnerability of the Uttarakhand, particularly its topography. And in fact after such flash floods, the rescue efforts have been immediately started involving State Disaster Response Force and also the National Disaster Response Force. Army and other forces are also involved in the disaster relief efforts. Right, so I hope you have understood the context. So let's understand what is a cloudburst and how these cloudbursts actually trigger flash floods in a state like Uttarakhand. Now let's understand the definition of a cloudburst. Now cloudburst generally defined as a localized extreme rainfall event, right? So cloudburst, just remember that it is a localized and extreme weather, extreme rainfall for a very short period of time. So it could be 10 centimeters or more also, right? So within one single hour or 2 hours, extreme rainfall within a particular area, more than 10 centimeters of rainfall would be considered as a cloudburst in a very simple way, right? So even 5 centimeters of rain in 30 minutes over the same area also qualifies as a cloudburst. Now whenever you come across a question on cloudburst, you must introduce the question with the definition of the cloudburst. So therefore remember the definition of the cloudburst. So okay, I would like to explain this again. So cloudburst is actually a localized extreme rainfall event for a very short duration. It could be 1 hour, 2 hours, right? So this phenomenon is called as cloudburst. However, even the 5 centimeters of rainfall for 30 minutes in a localized area can also be called as a cloudburst, right? This is cloudburst definition. And in fact these cloudbursts are more common in mountainous areas. So we'll understand why they're more common in mountainous areas, because a phenomenon called orographic lift. Now why Western Ghats are getting more rainfall? Now when I say Western Ghats, particularly the windward side of the Western Ghats receive more rainfall, what is the reason? The reason is this orographic lift. It is otherwise called as the orographic rainfall, right? So the windward side of the Western Ghats receives more rainfall because of this orographic lift. So mountainous areas generally receive more rainfall because of this orographic lift. So I hope you have understood this, because when the monsoon winds So when the monsoon winds, they come across such mountains. So in order to escape these mountains, they lift upward. They would lift upward, and that would result in a heavy rainfall over a short duration and over a particular area, and that might be considered or called as a cloudburst. And in fact, warm air, it generally ascends, it goes up over the mountain slope. So imagine that this is a mountain slope, and if warm air encounters such mountain slopes, it ascends, right? So it ascends and it further expands, and due to lower temperatures at a higher altitude, so the condensation will take place, right? So as it expands and cools at the higher altitude, air releases its moisture in the form of precipitation. So that is what is called as condensation or cloudburst over these mountainous areas. Now when large volumes of warm moist air keep on rising, accumulating moisture without releasing it, so therefore it can even lead to a sudden or a violent downpour over a very short area for a very short period of time, and this might be called as the cloudburst. And in fact, these cloudbursts are very common in mountainous areas. So therefore, because of their localized nature, so they are localized in nature, the cloudbursts are difficult to forecast and can even overwhelm the drainage systems, and thereby resulting in flash floods and landslides also, right? So I hope you have understood what exactly is a cloudburst. So let's understand how cloudbursts would result in flash floods over a area. Now heavy precipitation, heavy rainfall is because of the cloudburst. Now it could be 10 centimeters of rainfall or even 5 centimeters of heavy rainfall. So heavy rainfall further increases the chances of flooding in those mountainous areas. And in fact, in recent times, because of the land use patterns, right? So deforestation is mostly responsible, right? So deforestation in these mountain slopes, and apart from that, the shifting cultivation is also responsible. Shifting cultivation, deforestation, and human settlements over these mountain slopes. So all these factors have been rapidly changing the land use patterns. So whenever these mountain slopes don't have adequate vegetation, then there will be no interruption for the water which is flowing down the slopes, and that could immediately trigger flash floods. And in fact, in these mountainous areas, the slopes are also very steep, particularly in states like Uttarakhand. So therefore, drainage basins where valley sides are steep will return water to the river very quickly, right? So this also causes this. And apart from that, once they are full of water, surface runoff again runs into the rivers, and ultimately it creates a flash floods like scenario, right? So I hope you have understood cloudburst and flash floods as well. Now we'll get back to the flash floods tragedy in Uttarakhand and the rescue operations that are being launched by the government, right? So in fact, around 1:50 p.m. afternoon, a sudden flash flood hit Darali in Harsil Valley and Bhagirathi River Valley, so thereby sweeping away homes, shops and other infrastructure, creating a huge destruction in the state of Uttarakhand, right? And apart from that, the eyewitnesses, they have also described terrifying scenes. And in fact, they have compared it to one of the most disastrous tragedy that hit Uttarakhand, particularly Kedarnath, in 2013. And in fact, in this incident, at least 4 people have died and dozens of people were reported missing, and even 60-70 were rescued by the joint team efforts, and the NDRF and SDRF forces still continue their rescue efforts. And in fact, as I have already told you, that the forces such as NDRF, SDRF, Army, ITBP, local police, all these forces have involved, and they are being supported by multiple other operations as well, including the aerial rescue plans, They have used the Chinook helicopters, right? So all these are part of the relief and rescue efforts, particularly the flash flood management strategies. And in fact, it is part of the flash flood management strategies, and simultaneously the state government has also been implementing the flash flood management strategies so that the worst impact of this flash floods can be further minimized. And in fact, the roads remain blocked due to the debris, and the Border Roads Organization and Public Works Department, so they have engaged in reopening the access to the routes, because connectivity and infrastructure is very, very important, particularly to access areas which are worst hit by the cloudburst and also the flash floods. So therefore, the authorities have been reopening the access routes, and authorities are also working on the early warning systems to prevent the further casualties. Now, even in such a states, particularly a state like Uttarakhand, which is highly vulnerable to the flash floods and cloudbursts, there should be a early warning system. So early warning systems could actually minimize the loss of life and also the loss of infrastructure as well. And there is also a need for the environmental impact assessment that has to be done in sensitive and vulnerable areas to minimize such impact of cloudburst and flash floods. There is a need for afforestation. There is a need to regulate human settlements on mountain slopes, and also the regulation of commercial activities is also the need of the hour. So therefore, all these things have to be done. So let's understand the vulnerability of Uttarakhand to the flash floods and also the cloudbursts. And one thing that we should understand, Uttarakhand is a Himalayan state, so therefore it is having a rugged topography. And the other factor is that the topography of Uttarakhand state ranges from 800 to 619 meters, right? So in fact, it is associated with the orographic rainfall, right? So there might be sudden rainfall, and that could trigger cloudbursts, and that could even trigger the flash floods as well, right? So in fact, the entire Uttarakhand state is having these steep mountain slopes, valleys and glacial deposits. So therefore, the vulnerability of the state of Uttarakhand is very high for the flash floods and cloudbursts, right? So in fact, the continuous rain over the fragile terrain, and that further leads to mudslides and even debris flows. So they could even gain more and more momentum rapidly. And in fact, the river training methods are being considered to mitigate the future flood risks as well. And in fact, another river called Kir Ganga river, which overflowed due to the sustained rainfall over a very a very small area, and in fact it is not classified as a cloudburst as per the IMD criteria. And in fact, climate change is another factor which is responsible for the cloudbursts, because the climate change has been increasing the glacial melt and the rainfall intensity as well, and that has triggered 2013 Uttarakhand cloudburst, right? So it was a major disaster. Around 8,000 people have lost their lives during 2013 Kedarnath cloudburst, right? So all these things would further increase the flood risk as well. Because of the climate change, what has been happening? Glaciers are being melted. So melting glaciers would further increases the flood risk of states like Uttarakhand. And in fact, the annual rainfall of the Uttarkashi averages 1289 mm, peaking in the southwest monsoon season with an increasing frequency of extreme rainfall events as well. So therefore, the early warning systems should be in place. Environmental impact assessment needs to be done for new projects which are being proposed by the private sector and even the government sector as well. And there is a need for the regulations for the human settlements, and also regulations of the commercial activities which are being carried out, which actually hit the fragility of the Himalayan region. And there is also a need for a large scale afforestation that needs to be taken place in this area. And shifting cultivation should also be regulated. And community training is also very important. Along with community training, we should build the capacities of the people. Capacity building needs to be adequately focused. So along with the capacity building, what are the other areas that we could effectively focus on? So the other areas including providing training. So as I've already emphasized on community training, and decentralized planning is also very important. Decentralized planning is also very important. So all these measures must be undertaken to reduce the vulnerability of states like Uttarakhand to events like cloudburst and flash floods. So I hope you have understood the topic, and the next important topic would be India's presence in global geopolitics, right? So global geopolitics now in a flux. Now they are in a mess. We don't know whether the world is a multipolar, bipolar, or a unipolar world. So we don't have the idea. And apart from that, because of US President Donald Trump and his trade war and his decisions, so all these factors have created a mess. And I would say the Russia-Ukraine war, and in fact the Israel Gaza conflict. So what should be the India's approach in the global geopolitics, which is now in flux? So therefore, let's understand this in a very detailed way, and this could be important for your essay as well as general studies paper 2 international relations section. So let's understand the context of this topic. So the context is that now India's geopolitical approach, or the foreign policy approach, so recently is under the scrutiny, particularly because of some diplomatic setbacks that India faced and shifting global power equations post Operation Sindoor. Now, this is particularly amid the deepening US-China dynamics, right? So there is a deepening of US-China dynamics, and so India experienced all these things post Operation Sindoor. So what is this Operation Sindoor? So India conducted a military operation on the terrorist camps which are located in Pakistan, because those terrorist camps are responsible for the Pahalgam terror attack, which claimed 26 lives. Right, so I hope you have understood the context. So let's understand this topic. Now let's understand India and US relations. Right, so there's a diplomatic strains with strategic partners. So both India and US are strategic partners, and in fact during Donald Trump's first term as a president, and after that Joe Biden as a president of US, so India and US have maintained a very close relations and friendly relations. But after Trump became the president of US for the second term, there is a diplomatic strain in the strategic relations between these two countries. And there is a clear evidence at the global level that Pakistan's cross-border terrorism is responsible for the Pahalgam terror attack, and therefore there is a clear involvement of Pakistan in Pahalgam terror attack. And in fact, many of India's strategic partners have the information that Pakistan is responsible for the Pahalgam terror attack. Pakistani-backed terrorist groups are responsible for the Pahalgam terror attack, including the US as well. So despite such information, all the strategic partners of India, most of the strategic partners of India, so they refused to condemn Pakistan, or they refrained from condemning Pakistan. So therefore, it actually underlines a deep deficit existing in mutual trust between US and India. And in fact, on the day India-US joint collaboration satellite, which is called as NASA ISRO synthetic aperture satellite, right? So this satellite was launched on the very same day. The satellite was launched by ISRO from Sriharikota. The US imposed 25% of tariffs on Indian goods, which are linked Russian oil imports to the punitive trade actions taken by US against Indian goods which are exported to US. So therefore, it has been reflecting the transactional diplomacy between India and US. Particularly, US has been showing transactional diplomacy with India, and it has not been reflecting the strategic relation between India and US. And in fact, US posture in South Asia, so reviving ties with Pakistan, supporting opposition in Bangladesh and Myanmar, so all these factors have heightened or increased concerns for India. So despite India's concern, what US has been doing? US has been increasing or further enhancing its ties with Pakistan, supporting opposition to Bangladesh, Myanmar. They have creating troubles for India as well. So let's understand what exactly is this NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar. So in fact, this is a joint collaborative project between US NASA and India's ISRO. And NISA will be world's most expensive satellite with an estimated cost of 1.5 billion US dollars. And in fact, it will become world's first radar satellite to operate on a dual frequency. Right, so therefore this is very important, right? So this is most expensive satellite, and it also world's first radar satellite to operate on a dual frequency. And in fact, NISA is a joint project between NASA and ISRO to observe Earth in a never before resolution. It will observe Earth's most complex processes like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, landslides, ecosystem disturbance, afforestation, deforestation, and various other hazards with a very high resolution. And so therefore, this is a joint collaboration. So on the very same day ISRO launched this satellite, US imposed 25% tariffs on Indian goods which are being exported to US. Now let's understand Western hypocrisy and the economic targeting of India. Now in fact, US has imposed tariffs on Indian goods because US importing Russian oil. So US don't want India to import Russian oil because US and other Western countries feel that if India continues to import Russian oil, India has been fueling Russia's war. Right? So however, it shows the Western countries' hypocrisy because India is targeted over Russian oil. So why India is being targeted by US? Because India has been importing Russian oil. But what about the European Union countries such as Hungary and Belgium? So they continue to import Russian LNG, liquefied natural gas, with certain exemptions because it is important for them to ensure energy security. So don't you think India don't have any such right to ensure or look after its own energy security? The European Union countries have given certain exemptions to import LNG, but India cannot do it. So therefore, it shows the hypocrisy of the Western countries, and it also exposes the duplicity in sanction regimes of US and other Western countries. And similarly, European Union has already came up with the idea of this carbon border adjustment mechanism. And as part of this carbon border adjustment mechanism, so exports from India to European Union countries would be heavily taxed. So Indian exports to European Union would no longer be competitive as well if European Union implements the carbon border adjustment mechanism on Indian goods. And European Union even imposes the digital service taxes and sanctions on India's Vadinar refinery during India-European Union bilateral trade and investment agreement talks. So all these factors have signaled that there is a disregard for India's energy and trade sensitivities by both European Union countries and US also. And in fact, despite blocking Indian imports of Russian goods, US even permitted Nvidia to resume AI chip sales to China, thereby contradicting its stated security concerns and undermining India's tech interests as well. So let's understand China's strategic encirclement and India's policy dilemmas. Because China, with a policy called string of pearls, it has been strategically encircling India. So therefore, what are the policy dilemmas for India? So amidst the strategic encirclement of China and growing strain in India-US relations. So it is being said that Beijing has proposed a new trilateral with Pakistan and Bangladesh. Right, so there is a new trilateral with Bangladesh, Pakistan and China. So therefore it gives a push for a 2.5 front war between India and these countries if China forms such a trilateral. And therefore China also reviving air bases near Siliguri corridor. So Siliguri corridor is a very narrow passage between it is located very close to Bangladesh and China. So China, what it has been doing, it has been reviving air bases near Siliguri corridor, and it even supported Pakistan during Operation Sindoor, thereby complicating India's regional calculus. And in fact, China's control over rare earth elements, active pharmaceutical ingredients, essential machinery, they're being coupled with dam construction near the Brahmaputra and renaming of Arunachal locations. So therefore, all these factors on the part of China, they're provoking India's approach. Right, so in fact the border tensions, the Galwan clashes, and China very often renaming the places in Arunachal Pradesh, claiming that Arunachal Pradesh is a part of China, and its close relations with Pakistan and its growing relations with Bangladesh and growing presence in the Indian Ocean region. So all these factors have highlighted China's intentions of strategic encirclement of India. So therefore, India should carefully navigate. India should follow the policy of the strategic autonomy, fostering close and friendly relations with other like-minded countries, protecting its national interests. So I hope you have understood this topic. And next important topic is, let's talk about India's welfare state and how India's welfare state has actually focused on the data-driven approach, the evidence-based approach, instead of focusing on outcomes. So let's understand the context. So we all knew that India is a democratic welfare state. Now in India, welfare delivery is increasingly driven by data-centric algorithmic systems. Right, so in recent times, last 1 decade, so India's overall welfare is being driven by the data-centric and algorithmic systems. So therefore, it has been raising certain concerns about the political accountability and the democratic norms as well. Right, so let's understand this in a very detailed way. So in India, what has been happening is that there is a strategic shift from transforming welfare into the technocratic governance. So we all knew that the government has launched a number of welfare programs, and all these welfare programs that the government has launched are part of India's overall welfare system. So therefore, the welfare system is now prioritizing the performance metrics. What performance metrics? Like minimizing leakages, expanding coverage, over some fundamental questions of social justice and entitlement. So therefore, there is a clear shift in the focus from citizen rights to the deliverables. Right, so the focus has been shifted to minimizing leakage and expanding coverage over the social justice and entitlement of the benefits of the social welfare. And some programs that the government has launched, such as Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, E-Shram, so they actually reflect a unidirectional logic of measurable and automated governance, which is in line with minimizing leakages and expanding the coverage. So therefore, these programs, these welfare programs, they often exclude deliberate democratic participation of the people. So in any democracy, people's participation is very important. Focusing on the rights-based approach or people-centric or citizen-centric approaches when it comes to delivering the welfare programs is very, very important. Right, so instead of focusing on democratic participation and context specific decision making, the government has been increasingly focusing on the logic of measurable and automated governance. right? That could weaken the entire objective, the entire purpose of the welfare system in India. However, in recent times, the social sector spending or the welfare spending has also been declining. So in the financial year 24-25, the social sector spending stands at 17% and it dropped from 21% between 2014 and 24. So this was the social sector spending and it has been declined to 17%. And in fact, there are some sectors such as labor, minority, welfare and nutrition. So all these different sectors have been experiencing a steep decline in the allocations post COVID-19 pandemic. So let's understand the erosion of accountability and the democratic norms as well. Now, in fact, the RTI regime is weakened with over 4 lakh pending cases, right? So Right to Information Act, so that empowers the citizens with adequate information, and that also ensures the accountability and answerability of the government and the government employees to the people. However, the problem is that with RTI, around 4 lakh cases have been pending as of June 2024, and there are 8 vacancies in various information commissions also. So thereby it has been limiting the oversight and transparency in the welfare implementation. So RTI needs to be implemented in letter and spirit, but there is no political will to implement RTI in a most effective way. So RTI plays a very important role in ensuring transparency and accountability in the administration, and it also empowers the people and it also ensures the participation of the people in the governance process. And in fact, there are a wide variety of platforms, right? So such as centralized public grievance redressal and monitoring mechanisms. So in fact, such platforms are being launched by the government. So they are in fact improving the complaint visibility, but they are very often centralizing the data without devolving the accountability. So therefore they have been creating a gap between resolution tracking and actual responsiveness at the state and local levels. So therefore there is a need for a reflexive, inclusive welfare governance at the central and the state levels. So therefore the governance must be decentralized. The welfare programs must target the needy, the marginalized sections of the society. So the overall focus should be on the social justice. So in fact, India must empower states to design the context sensitive and also the pluralistic welfare models. So welfare models which can address the problems of people of multiple segments. So therefore, there are a number of programs which are previously implemented well at the state level. For example, Kerala's Kudumbashri program and Gram Panchayat development plans at the local level. And even the Gram Panchayat development plans are being implemented as part of the Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan. And so apart from that, there is a need to bring in mechanisms such as bias audits need to be done, offline fallbacks, and right to explanation and appeal as recommended by the United Nations Human Rights Commission. So they must embed in the digital welfare infrastructure. So therefore, in order to ensure a resilient and inclusive Viksit Bharat, so the welfare digitization, so that it must align with the democratic anti-fragility. So it should be in line with the democratic principles, thereby ensuring the active participation of the citizens, looking at the citizens as active partners, not just passive entries in the welfare databases, right? So I hope you have understood this topic, and this could be very, very important for Gender Studies paper 2 for social justice and governance. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And if you like our class, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.